Hello everyone and welcome to Collection Reflection. Today we will be reflecting on Carnage from Marvel's Epic Hero series. And before we look at the figure, we're going to take a closer look at his packaging. Starting with the front of this open box packaging, you can see a nice shot of Spider-Man and Carnage up there on top. Here's one side of the box, and you can see that the figure should stand about 4 inches tall, and there's the other side with his accessories. I really wish the paint on the figure matched the artwork. And there's the back of the packaging, where you can see the figure itself and his accessories. Diving right into the head sculpt, you can see that they gave him a nice sinister grin. Although I wish they would have painted the lines around his eyes black, because the shading on it stops right at his lips. And if you can see there, it looks like his whole face is supposed to have a hint of black all over it. I also wish the teeth were a little bit more pointed as opposed to what we ended up getting. But I do think they did a great job painting the eyes and the inside of the mouth. Looking at the rest of the figure, we can see that the only paint that's applied is going to be here on his chest and on his biceps. To me, it pretty much looks like a Rorschach test, as opposed to the almost web-like pattern that we get on the packaging. I think if they would have somehow managed to represent this actual artwork as a figure, I would have been much, much happier. But for what they did, it does add to the figure, and I do appreciate that. There's also a lot of sculpted detail. You can see his muscles, and there's fibers and lines all over the figure, almost like his skin got completely ripped off the body. He's got some really nice calf muscles. I also like that they even sculpted in the toes for him. Looking at the back of the figure, there's more of that sculpted detail, so you can see all the lines and ridges of the symbiote. And I like that they gave him stylized hands as opposed to just fists. However, they made the same mistake with this figure that they did with the Spider-Man. His arms look so small compared to the rest of his body. Even with his open hands, they barely reach his thighs. I think when you have a monstrous looking character like this, it's okay to make him disproportionate, but I would have preferred if they would have went in the other direction and made his arms a little too long, as opposed to what we get here. Now that we know how the figure looks, let's go ahead and see how the figure moves. His head can rotate 360. It can't really look up at all, or down at all. And I don't believe it has any tilt either. His arms can move outwards past 90 degrees, and they can move 360 with no problem. He's got some pretty good single jointed elbows, and they can also rotate 360. He's got a great splits, but he can only kick forward about that far, and back about that far. And he's got single jointed knees that give him less than 90 degrees. But just like the elbows, they also rotate. That's it for the articulation, so let's go ahead and take a closer look at his accessories. Carnage comes with this symbiote claw, and unlike the other characters from the Epic Hero series, he actually comes with 2 accessories. They both come with this little C-clip where you just snap it onto his wrists. The accessories look pretty good when you get them on the figure. They are a little tight, so you might want to be careful with that. But I do appreciate that they help make his arms not look so small anymore. Now that we've seen his accessories, it's time to compare him to some other figures. Starting off with some larger figures, we have Marvel Legends No and the Black Series Darth Malgus. Both of their blades are actually larger than the Carnage figure itself. For a more realistic 6-inch comparison, we have Marvel Legends Spider-Man and Power Rangers Skeleputty. Next up, we have a couple of recently acquired SH Figuarts. We've got Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta and First Form Cell. For the 5-inch comparison, we have Dragon Ball Evolves Broly and the BST AXN Itachi Uchiha. For the 4-inch comparison, we have DC Spin Masters Harley Quinn and Solomon Grundy. And here we have possibly the most important comparison of all, Marvel Epic Hero series, Spider-Man, and Venom. I think it would have been great if they would have included some of these tendrils on Carnage's body, since he's more known for using his symbiote to create things as opposed to Venom. As far as scale goes, I think they all scale pretty well with each other. For our final faction comparison, we have General Diabol and Steel. And finally, Pumpkin Wrapper's head. Look at the size of that thing.
Something wicked. This way comes.
When thinking of ways to enhance this figure, I really wish that they gave us something that looked more like the box art as opposed to something out of Fortnite. But I know I'm not talented enough to remove this paint and paint those lines back on correctly. I also probably couldn't give him that waist swivel that he desperately needs to get him into those awesome poses. So when thinking of things that I could actually do to improve this guy, I thought, well, maybe I could give him some better accessories. Starting off with my least favorite, I made this one mostly out of spite due to how small his arms are, so I just gave him some massive symbiote hands, which he can use to grab his enemies. Next up, I gave him a couple of symbiote weapons. They don't look the best, but they do add a lot to the character in my opinion. And if I position them correctly, it almost looks like he's making them out of his own body. This last one is probably the one I'm most pleased with. I just try to give him some extra tendrils sprouting out of his body because I thought that's what this character was mainly missing. The back doesn't look nearly as good as the front in my opinion, but I did try to include some bendy wires so they at least are flexible and movable. And I know these don't look the best, but if I can make it, you could probably make it better, and I'd actually be very interested in seeing all of your awesome creations. The materials I used to make these weapons are just toothpicks, bendy wire, rubber bands, and modeling clay. And the color of paint I chose looks a little bit better in person than it does on camera, but it definitely doesn't match exactly. When I first got this figure, I really didn't like it that much. The proportions in the arms and the lack of paint were pretty disappointing. But the more I messed around with him and paired him up with the other Epic Hero series figures, I started to like him more. I guess you could say he grew on me. So that brings us to the question. Should you collect this figure or reflect it? While I do think $11 is a little much for this figure, if you can look past those flaws and you decide you might want to make some accessories of your own, I'd say collect this figure. But if you don't plan on making any changes and you dislike the proportions of Spider-Man to begin with, then I say you should reflect this figure. Unfortunately, there's just not many villains in this line yet. So I am happy that I picked him up. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a chuckle at some point in your day. And please, try to be nice to somebody, because it could really change their life. I'll talk to you next time.